Thank you very much. Greetings from Singapore. I'm based in Singapore. I work for the World Bank, and I'm very honored and very happy to be moderating this session on cooperation and collaboration between finance and business sectors for zero carbon cities. For all of us, this is an extremely important issue and something that we have heard about and have been talking about, that cities contribute a large portion of the greenhouse gas emissions, but the actual levels of action have been not as robust as they should have been. So at the World Bank, we are also starting to work on this issue and to see how we could scale up our work in the areas that we have not been working on. Traditionally, the work across many parts, not just at the World Bank, but across many other areas, has been on the adaptation side from the city levels. And we now realize that cities' role in the mitigation side has to also be commensurate and has to start. So for that, in that context, I'm very happy that this session will look at three major questions that we would like to address. The first question is, how are cities working with the private sector to implement urban decarbonization efforts? And this is extremely important because we realize that local governments by themselves will not be able to manage the financing as well as the implementation. The second question is about the role of finance in zero carbon development and the international lessons that can be learned. And the third question that we're going to talk about is the role of public investment to attract private investment. This is a very important issue because without the public sector showing the indications and making sure that the private sector realizes that there is an element of public investment, the private sector may or may not think it's right to come forward with their own resources and their own investments. Now, to do this, we have 6 very good representatives. We have representatives from Saitama City and the city of Koriyama in Japan. We have the director from the UK 100. We have the operations and finance director from PTSMI in Indonesia. And we have the director of the corporate net zero women business coalition from the Sme Hub, and a representative from the Green Climate Fund, which is an international fund which is extremely important in this particular area. Now, with that, since we have not begun, let me invite the representative from Saitama City to make their presentation. Thank you.
So may I start? Thank you for the introduction. And my name is Tsukahara Takao. And I am the director for Future City Creation of Saitama City. And thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in the Zero Carbon City International Forum. First of all, in 2020, we saw this pandemic of a new coronavirus. And first of all, I would like to express our gratitude to all the people who are working in the hospitals and other areas, and also would like to express our sincere tribute to those who lost their lives because of COVID-19. And the Saitama City, the Prime Minister Suga last October declared that Japan will aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 with the virtuous cycle of economy and the environment as the growth strategy. And this carbon neutrality requires not just a strong leadership of the state, but the municipalities working closely with the private sectors and get the understanding and cooperation of citizens. And thank you very much for this opportunity then to talk about that. City of Saitama is situated in the Tokyo metropolitan area which comprises 30% of the total population of Japan. The city's population is 1.3 million, and we are one of the top runner cities, and we have responsibility as such. And in 2011, we were designated as a special zone for next generation vehicles and smart city. And we worked on reducing the environmental load and strengthening resilience. And in July 2019, we were chosen as SDGs future cities. And in July 2020, we declare that we are zero carbon city, trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And we are proactively conducting these activities for decarbonization as top runner city. And so far, we have worked closely with private sector and have given rise to many good results. And the basic stance of this collaboration lies with the division of labor. The private sector and the public sector have different purposes of activities. And the private sector needs to have the profits, otherwise they cannot continue with their activities. On the other hand, the public sector needs to work to increase the benefits and the interests of the citizens, and we need to increase the quality of citizens' life. In order to strengthen the public-private partnership, we have to have a clear division of labor and strike a balance between risks and return. And for that, governance based on contract is very important. So we have adopted the form of association or contract to promote this partnership. From 2015, in the Misono-Urawa zone in the city, which hosts the football in the Tokyo Paralympic and Olympics Games. And we are trying to create a smart city utilizing personal data, and we are working with 43 private sector as well as the academic institutions. And the core of this project is to utilize their personal data, and then we have to elicit the services out of these personal data in order to improve the quality of people's life. But the Japanese people generally have concerns about this use of personal data. And in order to resolve that concern, we need to provide security as well as safety. And the system and security and the safety can be provided by the private sector, and the security of mind can be provided by the private sector. So that is the division of labor. And from 2009, we have worked with 9 automotive companies trying to disseminate their future next generation vehicles. And we now have more than 150 charging stations right now. And we introduced the next generation vehicles for the city-owned fleet of cars. And since 2013, except for some exceptions, almost all the cars of city-owned fleet are future generation cars. And that is one way of fulfilling our responsibility. It is also a way of disseminating information to the citizens. And of course, this kind of activities cannot be done by one municipality alone. So we need to work together and then make up for the gaps. And we have to share the knowledge. That's very important. And we would like to host the E-Kizuna Global Summit in 2022 so that we can consolidate the city's knowledge and the technologies so that we can lead them to a greater development. We have responsibilities for the future children's to build a sustainable society. And so that's why we would like to continue working with you so that we can achieve this goal of decarbonization. And once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present what we are doing at Saitama City. And that is the explanation about how we are working with the private sector at Saitama City for decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. May I now invite the representative from Koriyama City to please make the presentation. Thank you.
I am from Koriyama City, Fukushima Prefecture. My name is Sakuma. I'm from Business Creation Division. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to discuss with you. And we would like to talk about what we are doing for decarbonization, and especially the project that we are doing with Essen City in Germany. Next slide, please. The city of Koriyama is in the Fukushima Prefecture. And 10 years ago, as you of course know, we were hit very hard by the earthquake and the tsunami, as well as the nuclear power plant accident. And the Fukushima Prefecture has a collaborative relationship with the Germany's North Rhine-Westphalen state. MOU was signed between the two entities. And as part of that activities, we are working with the Essen City, and the major areas of our work is the renewable energies and the medical equipment. And we concluded the MOU in 2014, and in 2017, Essen City and our city were chosen as a partner city for EU's International Urban Cooperation, and since then we have conducted study tours and their visits and so forth. And in 2019, and we concluded once again on the continuation of the cooperation, and also we added another area in our cooperation. And these photos are some examples of the activities, and this is the visit by Essen City to Koriyama City. And these are the photos of our visit to Essen City. Koriyama City has a national organization of renewable energy. And there is also national institutions working on industries and the environment. So it's not just the city-to-city collaboration, but the collaboration between the private entities as well as the national institutions are also being promoted. And then this is about trade fairs, and the Essen and Koriyama both hosts a very big city fairs, and the Reef Fukushima is the one we host in Koriyama City, and then we invite the Essen City to participate in this fair, and we also participate in their fair in Germany. And we are also conducting the business matching online, as you can see here, and this is about the uses of hydrogen. The city of Koriyama, we have a platform of the industrial and the academia, as well as the public partnership. It's called the Koriyama Study Group on Use of Hydrogen. And we are promoting the FCVs and EVs and the commercial stationary charging, the batteries. And we are using the city-owned land to conduct this full-scale experiment, which is conducted by ICE, which is a national institution. to use the hydrogen, and we are conducting this from 2019. So we are conducting these various kinds of activities, and we are also involving citizens in order to get their understanding about the uses of hydrogen. Our collaboration is not just about the renewable energies and environment, but we are also conducting workshops and other activities in order to promote the exchange between peoples. And lastly, just a few days ago, we marked the 10th year from the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake, and this online musical event was organized and live streamed online. And we have received a tremendous support in the last 10 years since we were hit by the disaster. So that's it from the Koriyama City. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. This is thank you very much for also helping us to keep within the time. Now, may I request the representative from UK 100 to make their presentation, please? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I don't have slides. I thought I would speak directly to you. My name is Polly Billington. I'm the director of UK 100, which is a network of UK cities, city leaders, the elected leaders of cities and local authorities across the UK who have made a commitment to shift to 100% clean energy by 2050. When we first formed, the priority that became very clear to us as an organization was that access to private finance was a big barrier to our leaders being able to fulfill their ambitions. Although there is public money available in the UK, quite often it is in small pots of grant money, which is available to be able to commission a feasibility study for a low carbon energy project. Once a feasibility study is done, transforming that study into reality has a big challenge. And that is because of the lack of development capital and patient capital available for local authorities to transform their communities to a low carbon to a low carbon economy and society. So we explored how we would be able to overcome that barrier by talking to national government and to local government and to the private investors themselves. What we found, and I'm sure this will not be of a surprise to anybody here on this call, is that one of the biggest things that investors wanted was regulatory certainty and a significant rate of return. What they couldn't do was invest in the broadly conceptual and embryonic projects that local authorities had. What local authorities did not have was the ability to turn those conceptual projects into something that was investable by the private sector. So our conversations, both with investors and with local government and with national government, came up with a set of recommendations to national government in order for them to be able to tackle this market failure. And what we suggested was that what we needed to do, what the national government needed to do, was to create some kind of function of both finance and advice that would help local authorities to transform their communities into low carbon societies and economies by helping them guide them through that development process and to build a business model. I overheard at the end of the last session the comments from Alex Minshall from Bristol City Council. Bristol is one of our leading members, and he pointed out that one of the things you need to focus on is scale as well as speed. What we found was that many local authorities' projects were simply too small for the private sector to consider investing in. So how do you change a vision for a community into something bigger than a project of retrofitting 30 houses or introducing a heat network for one estate of homes? How do you turn that into something big enough that the big investors are prepared to come out and help? And that's what we decided that government needed to be able to do, to support local clean energy partnerships where the local authorities had brought together a consortium of people, the local university, private business, some of the major employers, perhaps some of the major property owners in terms of housing, to see how they would use proven technologies in an integrated manner at scale, and then ask for that help from national government. We have also since calculated that although this money is available in small pots, if you add it together, the national government has 27 different pots of money available in different departments, all with low carbon in their criteria, and yet that money is being deployed as grants rather than as disciplined allocators, rather than being allocated by disciplined allocators of capital. So in response to our proposal for a critical friend of a central hub that will be able to help those local authorities, national government proposed local energy hubs, which now exist across England. In response to that, we've done further work and recommended that there should be a net zero development bank. In response to that, the UK government has announced their UK Infrastructure Bank. We are now engaging with the national government to shape that national infrastructure bank to ensure that not only does it have a net zero mandate, but that it also can advise local authorities to shape and develop their projects into something at scale enough for private investment to be crowded in. The national government in the UK is very worried about this being something which crowds out private capital. We are convinced if the nature of the capital is correct and it's invested in at the right point, at the development point of the pipeline, this could unleash a whole range of potential investable projects across the UK, which will enable the UK government to meet its target of being net zero by 2050, and most importantly, enable that sustainable capital waiting to be invested to find things that are truly investable in the UK, transforming our communities, decoupling growth from dependence on fossil fuels, and creating jobs in communities which are significantly struggling, not only because of the pandemic, but because of arguably decades of disinvestment. I hope that's useful.
Oh, thank you very much. See, having heard two cities and now a network of cities, let's move on to an organization from Indonesia, PT SMI from Indonesia, and please for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pa. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to this forum. My name is Darwin Trisna Jayawinata. I'm a CFO to PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure. PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure, or SMI, is a financial institutions. So we own 100% by the government of Indonesia. Our focus is to support the government mission on the infrastructure development and other sector as well. So as the financial institution owned by 100% by the government of Indonesia, we bring two mandates. First, on the mandates for the development, and the second one is also to balance with the commercial mandates that we have. So with those two mandates, I think there are some exercise and activities that we have to support the cities in Indonesia. There are three pillars of our business that we can do to support the local governments or the governments in the way that they would like to become the zero carbon cities. First is with the financing and investment. On the financing and investment, we have private financing arms and also the public financing arms. On the public financing arms is we provide the facility to the local government so the local government can develop the infrastructure program and also other sector program that they have in their plan. So and the second one with the project development, we support by providing the technical assistance, capacity building program to support local government in the way that they're developing the project or the program. So later on, the project or program can be in cooperation with the private sector through the PPPs, or probably they can access directly to the source of financing itself. And also the advisory, we are more than providing the expertise support to the local government, to the public sector, and also to the private sector in the way that they would like to access to the financing. By having those three pillars, I think we have now quite significant events and activities that we provide to the cities in the way that they would like to achieve their zero carbon. For example, in 2018, we established a blended finance platform working together with our partners from the multilateral, bilateral, as well as from the philanthropists and also with the private sectors on how both of them can do leveragings and look and this government or the public budget can also be much more effective and efficient by combining those sources together in providing support to the programs. This blended finance platform, we call it as a DG Initiative 1. So we have four pillars of four compartment of facility, from the developments, the riskings, investment, and also for the equity investment. So I think by having those compartment of facility, there's lots of projects that we can support that turn to the cities. Just for example, we're supporting cities. We provide kind of support by relieving them by providing financings and also grant for the city to rebuild themselves and to keep the operations of the city still can be achieved. Other examples that we have, we are providing the technical assistance support to the local governments in the way that they would like to transform themselves from the a carbon or fossil fuel transport system to relatively low carbon emission of transport system, like a BRT using the electric vehicle is something that we supported for the cities in Java. So now the city itself is already prepared with the documentation. This initiative is also being supported by the GCF. We are receiving the project preparation facility, and later on by having those documents, I think the cities now is ready to access for the financings. That's probably the examples that we have so far in supporting the cities. On the renewable, we are now working with philanthropists to establish the business case. So then the business case for the solar rooftop. So by having those business case, and then there we will have piloting models on the way that how this solar rooftop later on can be a new mainstream and can be the opportunity for the financial sector to provide their support on this program development. That's we have now identified several cities willing to do this solar rooftop programming, but on the other hand, we are still working together with the national power company who become the monopolistic off-taker in Indonesia to find the ideal way on how this project structure can be accepted by both parties. So that's probably our roles, and hopefully we can continue the discussion. I'm happy to take any answer on the discussion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for a very succinct presentation. And from a financing entity, which is going to be a very important interface between the cities and the finance sector. Now, with that, let me request the representative from ICC, we mean Business Coalition, that's the SME Hub. So please.
Thank you, Bajo, and thank you everyone for the invitation to join you today. I believe I have some slides and they're already up. So next slide, please. So what we've created between the International Chamber of Commerce, the We Mean Business Coalition, the Exponential Roadmap, and the UN Race to Zero campaign is the Sme Climate Hub. And this is actually the destination for SMEs to make their climate commitments. And it's become the hub for cities, states, regions, corporates and other stakeholders to foster partnerships with SMEs and help them deliver on their climate goals once they make their bold commitments. If you could move to the next slide, please.
By the way, slides are not visible to us. I don't know if somebody can fix that.
Yes, I can't seem to see any of the slides either.
If you click on the slide,
I can see them next to my.
If you click on the side, it enlarges.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're often asked why we focus on SMEs, and historically the climate community has made a big push to get corporates on board. Now we know that SMEs make up 90% of businesses worldwide. They're the backbone of our local communities and our economy. And we know they're essential for growth of the economy and as well as for innovation and scaling the next generation of green solutions. And they are a huge threat from climate change. Many of them do not recover from major disasters. And we say that helping them build resilience is more important than ever before. Next slide, please. So to help build that resilience, we need to understand what the challenges SMEs face are. And the three key pieces are limited resources, when there's so much to dedicate time, money, and staff on, a lack of know-how, how to go about this, what to do, and also the misalignment of incentives that small businesses can access on building resilience. Next slide, please. So our Sme Climate Hub has become a one-of-a-kind international platform that's the one-stop shop for SMEs to make an internationally recognized climate commitment, access best-in-class tools and resources, and then benefit from incentives and opportunities that provide real commercial value. So it's free, it's easy, and it provides high value to the SMEs. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, this is the partnership between the International Chamber of Commerce, the Exponential Roadmap, Women Business Coalition, and the UN Race to Zero. It's actually the SME route to join the UN Race to Zero campaign. Next slide, please. And we work in partnership with governments, with multinationals, with any other stakeholders that want to support SMEs to gain competitive advantage, to manage business risk, to improve their efficiencies, to access capital that Polly was talking so much about just now, and also grow that brand, show that these are SMEs that are committed to climate action. Next slide, please. And it's very simple. Companies come to the portal, the website, and they make a commitment to halving their emissions by 2030, as we know that's what the science tells us we need to do, and then to achieve net zero emissions by 2030, 2040, or 2050. Actually, 85% of SMEs choose to achieve net zero by 2030. And then importantly, we help them take action. We provide the tools and the resources that they need, all tailored to the SMEs themselves. And then we're building out the financial and the policy incentives to be able to help accelerate the action those SMEs can take. Next slide, please. So 750 SMEs have joined over the last few months. That's from 55 countries. We also, on our tools platform, we have from 72 countries, about 110 users a day using the tools from 355 different cities. So we're spreading far and wide. Next slide, please. Actually, next slide. In the interest of time, we can skip through to the next one. And next slide, I've already mentioned that this is the route to the UN Race to Zero campaign, which is a combination of multiple net zero initiatives that include the science-based targets, the climate pledge with Amazon, and the Sme Climate Hub. Next slide, please. And importantly, we have a group of 1.5 supply chain leaders of corporations that recognize their role in mobilizing SMEs to be able to take action and how that helps them achieve their climate goals as well. And some of the big recognizable names of the supply chain leaders are there. Next slide, please. And we run a set of supportive projects as well that are all about working with multinationals and banks to improve working capital. We work with Climate Disclosure Project, CDP, one of our partners, to develop tracking, accountability, and reporting frameworks for SMEs to make that an easy and workable framework for them. And we also are developing a number of education tools and webinars with Cambridge University, with Business for Social Responsibility, to be able to help SMEs on those first steps to understanding what they need to do. Next slide, please. And that's it, hopefully just in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we are running just a little behind time. And so, but in any case, we would let me invite representative from the Global Climate Fund for his presentation, please. Thank you.
Okay, if I can ask, it's a Green Climate Fund, by the way.
Sorry, Green Climate Fund. Sorry.
Can you make presentation visible, because the presentation is not visible and it's 10 pages, otherwise it's going to be very boring. Can you make it a full screen, please?
It is full screen.
No, I cannot see it, no.
So I found I had to double click on my face on the Zoom, and then it popped it up on my screen.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Yes, now it's a full screen. Okay, so Green Climate Fund is the financial instrument of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. It is currently in the GCF1 phases, and it has about $10 billion available for developing countries. My name is Dražen Kučin. I'm a sector lead for the urban and energy efficiency for the public sector projects, and we have been able to build about $3 billion portfolio in the past 4 years in this area. Next slide. We will quickly talk about climate change realities in cities, taxonomy of the difference between green and smart cities, global investment potential of climate smart urban infrastructure, and GCF sector-driven interventions. Next slide. The cities are essentially currently emitting about 71% of the global GHG emissions, and very likely they will be moving to 76% of energy related to GHG by 2030, all coming from the cities. What we have to be aware of is these are the emissions which are not only scope 1, but scope 2 and scope 3, which are consumption-based emissions, and consumption-based emissions embodied in fuel, food, building materials, and water. There is also average per capita GHG emissions really varies between very developed countries and underdeveloped countries. So for instance, just Rotterdam has about 29.8 tons CO2 equivalent annually, where for instance, Amman has only 3.4 tons CO2 equivalent annually. And also growing importance of urban economies, both Tokyo and New York have a greater GDP than Canada, and by 2030, New Delhi will have a greater GDP than Malaysia. So urban economies and the way we organize emissions and how economies functions is really crucial for our survival. Next slide, please. Just remind you that we are still trying to kind of balance the IPCC report and scenarios. 1.5 degree scenario suggests that the global available carbon budget is about 750 gigatons of CO2 equivalent until 2030. 2 degree scenarios is suggesting that the global carbon budget is about 1,050 gigatons of CO2 equivalent until 2030. In both cases, we have problems with disruptive path dependencies. We have economic growth according to the past methods that is not really working very well. And in 2 degree scenarios, unless we stop just the emergence of new cities for 2.5 to 3 billion new people, which will give the footprint of construction of new infrastructures in developing countries and economies, we will not be able to stop the climate change. Next slide. However, as you all, I'm sure aware, is that climate reality continues to unfold, and refinement of climate sensitivity scenarios are already towards the 3 degrees. The recent reporting from the assessment of the Earth's climate sensitivity using multiple lines of evidence by review of geophysics in 2020 suggests that we are already between 2.6 degrees and 4.1 degrees pathway. And at the current rate, within 5 to 60 years, we will be doubling the CO2 emissions in our Earth. Next slide. So what we are trying to say is, how do we rise to the challenge? How do we address market failures and negative externalities? And I will try to explain what GCF is doing about this, right? So we are obviously have to take actions that enhance productivity, resilience, and innovation while reducing the carbon intensity of our economic and social activities. And we continue to focus on the Green Climate Fund continues to focus on green and smart cities. We are trying to pursue transformative pathways for urban systems through retrofitting megacities and supporting planning and development of carbon neutral, carbon negative secondary and intermediate cities. Next slide. I'm rushing a little bit because we are out of time. So the green cities on its own is that the green urban development considers how to improve and manage the overall climate considerations on low emissions and climate resilient development, quality of health and water, its correlation to hinterlands, and wider ecosystem services. The green cities are really important for developing countries' context because very often this is the forum held in Japan. Both Japan and South Korea, for example, are very much interested in smart cities. But developing countries really cannot achieve smart city status overnight. So they are really looking into the how to first achieve the green city status before moving down the value scale. Next slide. So in the contrast to green cities, we have smart cities, which are all about big data and artificial intelligence, as you know. In broad directional sense, will not anytime soon, developing countries and cities will not anytime soon reach this focus. They have to focus on green cities and orientation and strategy. What is within our grasp is that we focus on the combination of developmental and climate impact interventions that will make these cities prioritize low emissions and climate resilient infrastructure and development. But of course, leapfrogging ambitions towards smart cities development should never be ignored or forgotten. And of course, cities will eventually significantly benefit from becoming, a climate for big data and artificial intelligence with energy efficient buildings, sustainable transportation, on-demand energy management, which are a few examples of smart cities technologies. Next slide. This is what we do as intervention in GCF. We are providing transformative action fields for cities. We are focusing on decarbonization of energy sector with renewable energy storage, improving of energy efficiency in building stocks, mobility and transportation, urban form, urban resilience, materials and materials flow, and improving waste management. I'm not going to read now to you what does this mean in the context of 2030 or 2050 GHG emissions reductions. You will have a copy of the presentation and you can look. Next slide. Main urban dimensions for creating a smart city, just as a reminder, are the smart living, smart economy, smart energy and efficiency, smart governance in terms of participation, smart mobility in terms of connectivity, smart environment in terms of sustainability, and smart people in terms of governance. And again, there are all sorts of criteria and value chain events that we actually have to drive for to achieve urban dimension for creating a smart city. Next slide. Catalyzing private sector investment in climate smart city. This is the really focus of our discussion. By the data available from IFC in 2017, some 29.4 trillion of US dollars in opportunities exist in developing countries alone across 6 urban sectors that reduce emissions. These are the renewable energy, public transportation, climate smart water, electric vehicles, and green buildings. Let me just tell you that electric vehicles demand for GCF financing in Latin America alone is currently surpassing 6 billion. And electric vehicles demand for the networks in Asia is surpassing 8 billion just for the Green Climate Fund financing. So climate resilience also presents significant private investment opportunities as climate change becomes an increasingly powerful macroeconomic trend. We are all better at understanding markets, better priced climate change. So the value, importance, and return of companies and assets that are intrinsically resilient or provide resilient solutions is going to become very, very important. And finally, according to a recent survey of the world's biggest companies, climate adaptation products and solutions could result in about 236 billion of increased revenue, and that is by the Global Climate Adaptation Commission in 2019. Next slide. I'll try to finish soon. In GCF, we see paradigm shifting pathways through decarbonizing distributed energy, energy efficiency building, green mobility enhanced cities, circular urban economy, and competent resilient infrastructure through 4 drivers of paradigm shifting: transformational planning and programming, catalyzing climate innovation, mobilization of finance at scale, and expansion and replication of knowledge. And of course, we can discuss this in more detail in a discussion. Next slide. This is roughly how we see the urban finance really being developed, and it's not really a visible picture, but essentially we have, can you press one more time because there is a legend coming to it? Press one more time, slide. They don't hear me. Yes, thank you. So this is, where we understand. So on the top, we have international institutions, potential donors, national and subnational governance. Most city financing, it really is a decentralized finance, subnational finance, and has to be understood in that context. Players in such a market are other than international institutions, also national capital markets, national commercial banks, national development banks, which essentially are the missing link in connecting the international finance with the local upskilling opportunities. So cities and empowering cities to engage in transformative action field is absolutely crucial. So that's just a bit of a slide there for you to help understand. Next slide. And that will be the end of my presentation. Sorry, I'm a little bit over time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And I apologize for misusing the name of your organization. It is the Green Finance. Sorry, thank you. And now, I think we are a little behind time, so I'm going to rush. So please bear with me. May I ask the representative from UK 100 to just give us very briefly what she thinks is the best way that networks like yours can help networks of cities to approach the private sector, because cities may have smaller projects, but how can cities band together to approach the finance sector to have larger packages, please?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and it's one that our network is exploring now. I think what's interesting is that many cities actually want to develop a portfolio within their own city of proven technology integrated projects at scale. And we also know that there is potentially the opportunity to aggregate projects across geographies when you're focusing on one particular technology. And that is obviously of much more interest to private investors who are more comfortable with one technology at a time, find that the regulatory frameworks are more manageable, the legal frameworks and so forth, and etc. So we have some members of our network who have collaborated, for example, on large-scale solar farms where they have all pooled their resources together and worked to develop that business model, crowded in private capital, and therefore have effectively been able to say that they are generating enough electricity by renewable sources that they can effectively say that they're covering their own electricity needs as a local authority. That's happened in places like Warrington in the northwest. It won't be a name that will trip off your lips because it doesn't have an internationally recognized football team, but it's halfway between Manchester and Liverpool, if any of you ever want to go and see it. And they've collaborated with other local authorities across the country. But what's interesting and important in terms of making sure that these things happen is connecting the elected leaders who make the decisions, giving them the authority to be able to say to their finance teams, this is an important part of what you do in terms of making the sums add up. And what we found in places like Warrington is that ultimately, if the officers in the finance team think it makes financial sense, they will be able to persuade many other people in the organization to get things done. So if it stays with the sustainability team or the energy team, you will not be able to get as much done as if you manage to convince the finance team and the accountants. We have really good examples from our network of local authorities who have now got that understanding of the value of sustainability into the finance team, and therefore the kind of decisions that they make are very different. But if you're talking about collaborating across networks, there is a possibility of doing that. Our concern about that is that what you do is you still leave large parts of your own local society and economy uncarbonized, and the bits that are the easiest to get investment for get done, and you don't get the rest of it done. So you might be able to buy 100% clean energy effectively from your solar farm, but you still haven't decarbonized your transport, you still haven't decarbonized your buildings.
Thank you very much. Now, may I ask the gentleman from Koriyama City about the very interesting program on the hydrogen experiment? How did the financing for that particular initiative come about? How did you structure it? And could you please stay within a 2-minute period, please? Thank you. Sorry to do that.
Yes, from the Koriyama City, yes. As I said in my presentation at the outset, in case of Fukushima, because we experienced the nuclear power plant accident, which was very unique, in the initial stage, we had to develop the facilities, and the funding came from the state government because of this accident. But the 10 years have already passed since the accident, and now we are entering the new stage. For example, in this hydrogen mobility project, we are now trying to build the commercial facilities for hydrogen. Then in that case, we, the city, will fund, but basically the fund comes from the private businesses. But we also involve the banks, and we build the consortium to fund this particular project. That's it from me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, may I ask Saitama City, you mentioned that in the public-private partnership, there have been challenges about use of personal data. So when you use personal data as much as you have been trying to use, what have been the problems that the private sector has had in convincing the people, the population, the citizens, that their data would be safe, and therefore they welcome the private sector's participation? Thank you.
Yes, so the convincing the citizens about the use of personal data is probably the responsibility of the public, us. But what we expect of the private sector is the technologies to make sure that personal data is used in a safe manner. And then based on that, we can convince and we can tell our citizens that because of this, this is safe. And that's how we collaborate with the private sector.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer. That's sound. We hope that it works out very well. Now, may I ask PTSMI? There is interest from on the chat to know what has been the push for the sustainable investment, and what have been. Can you give us a few instances of good impact that you have been, a fund like yours has been able to demonstrate?
Yeah, thank you. The good example that I can show you is last year's. There's a program, what we call as the Economic Recovery Program, to support the cities on how we can strengthen the fiscal that impacted by this pandemic. So we provide what we call as a very concessional facility that being backed by the government, a public budget, channel to us as a loan, and then we channel this as the loan also to the cities. With this 0% interest, we would like to have in returns that the cities can follow our ESG frameworks. So we can provide those facilities as long as the city can fulfill all the requirements under our environmental social standards. And we will provide more incentives if the cities actually would like to establish what we call a very a climate-friendly project. For examples, like the renewable energy projects or the SDG projects, like a water, for example. So then we can provide, aside of this concessional facility, we can provide a kind of a technical assistance. We can provide a grant, investment grant, that we actually blended finance platforms that we have. So we can do this together, allowing the cities to actually realizing the program in an instant manner. So that kind of things that we are doing. So in the future, probably what we will do is actually we keep continuing pushing these environmental standards as our main principle that should be acknowledged by the recipients of the facility. Meanwhile, we also trying to actually seek of partnership with the potential investor on the green financing. So we are acting as an intermediary in this context. Green bonds, sustainability bonds is something that on the green bond, I think we are already there, but on the sustainability bond, on the blue bond or whatever type of thematic bond, that probably is becoming our target in this year and also for the next year.
Thank you very much. Now, so we've been talking about the funds, and we've been talking about the cities. But may I ask the SME Hub, what have been the most difficult issues that SMEs face when they try and approach cities for projects or for to either identify projects or to have their projects implemented? And on the other hand, what have been their problems when they approach the financing entities to finance local government projects or projects in local governments? Thanks.
Yeah, and we've seen three key challenges to this that really revolve around our access to capital project. So access to capital is the key barrier for SMEs, that they've got their tight margins and no working capital to put towards decarbonisation, even if there's relatively fast payback periods. And that's where we've seen a key opportunity, that there are multinationals out there that are really dependent on SME suppliers to achieve their climate goals, but they lack the clear structures to incentivise and empower supplier action. And the same with cities as well. But then we know on the other side that the banks, financial institutions really scaled up their supply chain finance offerings in recent years, but they've had difficulty in properly assisting highly fragmented SMEs, local businesses, to get the appropriate schemes to them. So what we see as the key opportunity is bringing those stakeholders together, getting them to work, to collaborate, to really understand what the market is, what the needs are, defining the appropriate incentives, conducting some pilots, and moving towards real concrete collaboration that's clearly going to work for the SMEs. And so that's what we're planning to do in the coming months.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to ask a million-dollar question to the GCF. Is that what is the mechanism for cities to approach, or is there a mechanism, is there a path for cities to approach directly the GCF? That's one side. And the other side, is there a pathway for private sectors to approach the GCF? So from both sides. Thank you.
Of course, the question is always about how do we get to the money, and I think that's fine. That's fine with us. First of all, this week is actually what we have this week is the B28 board meeting in Songdo in South Korea, and one of the things we're discussing is the project-based accreditation that will be accessible for many individual small organizations, including or municipal organizations such as cities. So we are on the verge of adopting a project-based accreditation. If that is the case, all of the cities in developing countries will be able to access the GCF fund. So that's the first step. We are not there yet, but we're almost there yet. Otherwise, the system is based on cooperation between national designated authorities in developing countries who are representing priority investment strategies for GCF and accredited entities. And by the way, PTSMI is one of the accredited entities for the GCF. So you have to kind of find who is the accredited entity or direct access entity in your country, and you have to work with the national designated authority in prioritizing investment you are trying to apply to GCF. So that's broadly it. And the second question, sorry, was I forgot already.
So one was how can cities, which you have done, and is there a pathway for the private sector to approach the GCF?
Okay, we have a private sector facility. So there is a special window for private sector to access GCF financing, and there are active colleagues who are very accessible. So you can just go into the Green Climate Fund website, and you can access private sector facility and simply ask a question. And the principles there are also equal. You have to work with the accredited entities and national designated authorities to provide concept and proposals that can be eventually considered by the GCF. So it's absolutely possible that the private sector directly get access to the GCF financing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, may I ask the organizers if there is any question from the participants to the panel? Well, I guess there isn't, but so since we still have about 5 minutes, are there any questions that any one of you on the panel have for somebody else on the panel? Feel free to speak up. Sure, go ahead.
I'm interested in talking to Dean about the SME initiative, because that's something that I know our members are particularly keen on. There are very few local authorities in the UK now who have one big dominant employer. And of course, most of our communities are, as Dean says, focused on dependent on lots of small and medium-sized businesses which really want to be able to make that shift. And the importance of the supply chain, particularly for local authorities who are determined to have a sustainable procurement policy, and yet also support their local businesses who may not be actually ready to be able to provide something that actually meets those criteria. It will be really helpful to have further conversations about how we might be able to collaborate between your network of SMEs and how you're supporting them and our local authorities who also want to support SMEs to be able to do the right thing and in transforming their communities.
Yes, thank you, Polly. And you've really hit the nail on the head there, that this SME Climate Hub thrives on the partnerships and working with other organizations where we can reach the mass of SMEs. And that's how we have an aspirational goal to get 1 billion SMEs committed to net zero. And that's what's been put upon us by the high-level champion for COP, Nigel Topping, and Gonzalo Munoz. So we know we can only achieve that by working with governments, with states, with regions. And we've got some exciting plans. There'll be something coming out next week that will give an idea. Unfortunately, I can't share it now. I'd have loved to have done this till next week and then shared. But there will be a way to make, to have sort of portals where all partners, where local authorities can easily send their suppliers to take action on this. So it would be great to follow up.
That'd be really good. That's exactly what our members need.
Thank you. Does anybody either from Koriyama City or from Saitama, do you have any questions for the rest of the panel? Okay.
No, I don't have one.
So then in that case, I think we will be able to close a little early. So I think in true Japanese style, I think we have met the timekeeping. I hope that we've managed to stay within the time frame. So thank you everybody for attending, and thank you very much for the Ministry of Environment of Japan for organizing this event. And we hope that the cities will continue to get more attention as we go forward, because we know how difficult it is for cities to be on this platform, where this is a very important platform, but cities have been left out, or they have not been able to participate because they have not had the right, they have not been prepared right enough to be able to participate. So with that, let me thank everybody for their participation and everybody on the organizing committee. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.